we find it said that Muhammad had either 9 wives at one time or he had 11 wives at one time. Either one of those is a lot more than 4. We report accurately what your historical sources say, and Muslims call in and say, you're making this up, you're lying. Think about this. Yahya Snow, earlier we talked about this. We have all the sources, and the sources support what we're saying. And Yahya Snow says, you guys don't know what you're talking about, doesn't give any references to support what he's saying. Think about that. Manu calls in. No, you have to reject all those clear statements that Aisha was 9 years old. Here this guy, no, you're totally wrong when you say Sahih al-Bukhari says that Muhammad had more than 4 wives, even though I just read it to you. What do we have to do here? It's like Muslims are saying, we're going to tell you what the sources say, but we don't care at all what the sources actually say. The sources say what we want them to say, not what they actually say. This is what you have to do as a Muslim in the world today. You have to just be completely irrational and illogical, throw out, I mean, think about this. If I sit down with this man who just called, if I sit down with him and I open a copy of Sahih al-Bukhari and I say, it says right here Muhammad had 9 wives,
no,
or it says
wrong.
right
that's
here.
Wrong. That's
no,
wrong.
it's wrong. What's wrong? What's wrong?
This guy was with Muhammad. He knows. Well, thank you so much for your call. Please do call back again. Real quickly before the next caller, does he read the Quran? I mean, you got this verse that comes down, you can marry 2 or 3 or 4, and then later the Quran says to Muhammad, what you should not prohibit yourself, right? You should not limit yourself. Allah has made it lawful for you to have more.
Surah 3350, if you'd like to read it. That's where Muhammad is allowed to have more than the 4-wife limit. So Allah lays down a rule that applies to everyone, but Muhammad, and only Muhammad, is exempt from Allah's moral law. My friends, you telling me that you treat Muhammad just like another human being when he is the only person in the world who doesn't have to follow Allah's moral command?
Yeah, and so this verse becomes completely meaningless if Muhammad never had more than 4 wives at a time, because he would have never broken his own rule. But he did break his own rule, and so the verse comes down, Surah 33, verse 50, and I believe Aisha in the hadith even said, what? How your Allah hastens to fulfill whatever your
wishes and desires.
Your wishes and desires.
Think about this, if you didn't catch that. Muhammad repeatedly received revelations that have no purpose other than satisfying his desires. So there's a 4-wife limit, but it doesn't apply to Muhammad because he gets a special revelation saying it doesn't apply to you, Muhammad. It wasn't allowed during his time to marry the divorced wife of your of your son. So Allah sends Muhammad a revelation saying it's okay for you to marry the divorced wife of your adopted son because I'm giving you a special revelation saying adopted sons aren't really sons, and so you can marry their wives. Special revelation. Allah in 66:1, the origin of 66:1 was that Muhammad was having sex with his slave girl. Muhammad's having sex with his slave girl, and it upsets his 9 or 11 wives at the time. And they actually get him to agree that he's going to stop having sex with his slave girls. So Muhammad makes an oath to his wives. And then Surah 66:1 comes down. Muhammad, why are you forbidding what Allah has not forbidden you? So Muhammad, you get to break that oath and go on having sex with your slave girls. Over and over again, Muhammad gets these morally convenient revelations. And one day, when Muhammad's receiving one of these morally convenient revelations, Aisha says, in Sahih al-Bukhari, how your Lord hastens to satisfy your wishes and desires. This is the mother of the faithful looking at Muhammad and saying, isn't it strange that every time you have some weird or perverted desire, Allah gives you a revelation and says, you get what you want, Muhammad.
Amazing. Amazing.
And it doesn't bother Muslims. This would shock me. Could you imagine? We don't have to deal with this in Christianity.
No, there's no problem.
We don't have to look at the example of Jesus and see Jesus saying, I give you all these moral commands, but I get to go and do all these extra things. And the Father has no purpose other than satisfying all my sexual desires. No, we don't have to deal with that. We don't have to deal with it with Jesus, with Paul, with Peter, with any of these people. But Muslims are stuck with this, and it never bothers. I don't understand how it could not bother you. If I see a prophet if a prophet walks up to me and he says, I'm a prophet, and I just received a revelation from God saying no one is allowed to have more than 4 wives. And I say, okay, so obviously you have 4 wives or less. And he says, no, what are you talking about? I got 11. An alarm is going to go off in my head. An alarm is going to go off. Wait a minute, this guy's a false prophet. And it would be obvious to anyone that this guy's a false prophet. But Muslims, it just doesn't bother them. And that's why we say you're not treating Muhammad like a normal human being. Normal human beings, we hold to moral consistency. The fundamental rule of morality is practice what you preach. Don't be a hypocrite. Don't point to everyone else and say, you have to follow these standards, but I don't have to follow them. Don't do that. And that's exactly what the greatest moral example in history did, according to you. He violated his own revelations, and it doesn't bother you at all.
And the munafiqun, the hypocrites, are specifically called out and cursed in the Quran. Very interesting, quick, stark contrast. You've got Jesus, who was so morally pure that no man on earth can even approach how morally perfect he was. And then Muhammad, that has done so many things reported in the Quran and the Hadith, that we have Muslims constantly calling in, trying to defend their prophet by denying that he ever did those things. We don't have that problem with Jesus.
No, we don't. And I'll just add for all of the Muslim reinterpreters out there. So for Yahya Snow and for Manu, who want to throw out the idea that Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl, they just want to reject that. Or our friend who says, even if it says in our most trusted collections that Muhammad had 9 or 11 wives at one time, I don't care. I don't care. If you believe that, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. If you want to constantly reject your best sources, follow that through to its logical conclusion, my friends. If Sahih al-Bukhari contains numerous historical inaccuracies and false statements, and that's your best source on the life of Muhammad, if your best source on the life of your prophet is filled with errors and inaccuracies, guess what? Don't tell me you know anything about your prophet. Yeah. Don't tell me you know how to pray 5 times a day. Where is it written? Muslim friends, where is it written that you pray 5 times a day? Sahih al-Bukhari. If you're not supposed to pray, if you don't trust Sahih al-Bukhari and you think it's filled with errors, why do you pray 5 times a day? If you think that your most reliable narrations about Muhammad are unreliable, guess what? Don't tell me anything. Don't tell me you know anything about Muhammad. The Quran tells us next door to nothing about Muhammad. And if your sources that actually do tell you about Muhammad are unreliable, wow, I'm glad we're not in that situation in Christianity. We have first-century sources on the life of Jesus. We agree on those sources. We don't throw those sources out. Your best sources on the life of Muhammad that you appeal to come from more than 2 centuries later. And you say they're untrustworthy and we're throwing out all these passages. Great. Well, now, if you know nothing about Muhammad, you can't give us any reason to believe that he's a prophet. If you can't give us any reason to believe that he's a prophet because you've thrown out your most reliable sources, then how can you expect us to say there's only one God, Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet? We don't know anything about him. We don't know. I mean, think, some random guy who lived in some century and we don't know anything about him. Believe in him and it's required for your salvation. What sense does this make? This is what you're stuck with. You can either believe your sources or you can say they're unreliable. If you believe them, you're stuck with Muhammad raping his female captives, Muhammad having sex with a 9-year-old girl, Muhammad violating his own revelations. If you decide, well, I don't like that, I can't believe that about Muhammad, so I'm going to throw out those sources, now you know nothing about your prophet. Either way, you have to either accept that Muhammad did some of the worst things we can imagine, sex with a little girl, or you have to throw out what we know about Muhammad and tell us, believe in Muhammad, though we don't know anything about him. That's what you're stuck with, Muslims.
We have a little time, we have a lot of callers, but I'd like someone who speaks Arabic, who's not deceptive, to call in and tell us what is the meaning of the name Muhammad in Arabic. Is it not praised one? I'm pretty sure it is. Muhammad, praised one. Let's get an Arabic caller to call in and tell us about that. All right, let's take the next caller right now. Welcome, you're on the air with Jesus or Muhammad.
Both.
Jesus or Muhammad, both. Okay, go right ahead.
Yes, Pastor Joseph, this is Saleh.
Oh, Saleh, I've been missing you. I haven't heard from you in a long time. Thanks so much for calling. I'm glad to hear you're still alive.
Oh, thank you. Alhamdulillah. How are you, David? David,
good.
Greeting for you too, David.
Yeah, Saleh, real quick, you speak Arabic. Muhammad, doesn't the word Muhammad mean praised one?
Well,
like Alhamdulillah,
okay.
Alhamdulillah, Muhammad.
Okay, let me start from the reason I call, and then I will do that.
Go ahead.
You see, Pastor Joseph, I have listened to the lady, the Christian sister, which have called